and put it online, and I had no idea. I stopped on the Whataburger on the way back home, and I looked up while I was eating my burger, and I was like, that little girl. But it has been the most amazing couple of weeks for me. And the reason is, it has nothing to do with ego, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that people were like, yes, that's the way I feel. Yes, that's the way we all need to stand up. I want to speak for the Taylor County Democratic Party. I have been chair now for about 6-7 months. It hadn't been long. And I want to tell you, we've got energy in the Taylor County Democratic Party. I want to tell you that if you're interested in standing up for Texas, if you're interested in fighting for democracy, you need to look at our party. What has the Republican Party done for us? Let's look real quick. Jody Arrington's our congressman, right? Okay. We're Democrats, we're nice, right? We might be losing, or very well could lose, $1.9 million for Meals on Wheels. Guys, come on. Albany just announced they're not going to have free lunch for the kids. And now adult ed has been pulled. No, they're after all the programs that serve working people. We have to stand up. I don't care if you have a D next to your name, an R next to your name, an I next to your name, or nothing next to your name. This is about fighting for working class people. If you know me for 5 minutes, that I've been working here in Abilene for about the last 25 years. Everybody saw that video? That's me. But here's the deal. There are thousands of me in Abilene, Texas. I can tell you that right now. So let's find out. When the Abilene Taylor County Democratic Party has an event, step up and show us. Step up and volunteer, or just step up and say, what can I do to help? And we'll find a role for you. I don't care if it's just writing a check. I don't care if it's just volunteering for an event. We've got a picnic coming up, and I'm gonna promo this, August the 24th at the Festival Gardens. It is going to be a picnic for us to socially get together and talk about things that we have in common, and to raise a little money so that we can keep our party office open. It is so important that we do that. So I cannot leave today without asking you to keep us in mind. And if you don't know how to do that, reach out to me. Okay, you probably had enough of me. So I'm here, and I was asked, and I have the honor of introducing our guest today, our main guest. I remember when Jody Arrington came and visited the bookstore last year. Wait a minute, no, that wasn't Jody Arrington. That was Beto O'Rourke. I remember Jody Arrington coming and doing another event. I want to say maybe here or somewhere. No, that wasn't Jody Arrington, our congressman. That was Beto O'Rourke. Beto O'Rourke has been here more than our own congressman has. Why? Jody, you ran from D.C. to avoid Epstein. You got time to stop by, buddy? You got time to try to get 200-300 people here to listen to what you say? Because you don't want to hear what we have to say. That big ugly bill is going to leave some bad situation in rural Texas, and we haven't even touched our rural hospitals. Wait till that happens. So I have the distinguished honor of introducing somebody that has been fighting for all Americans, for all of us. It doesn't matter who it is. I still remember him riding in a car with a Republican during COVID or something, and that's where a lot of people are like, well, who is this guy working with Republicans? He didn't care. He just had to get a job done, getting from point A to point B. That's who we have here today. So it is my distinct honor to introduce Beto O'Rourke. sir. You did good. Yeah.
All right. Can we take a minute to acknowledge Sammy Garcia, who a couple of weeks ago, when they tried to launch this redistricting scam on the people of Texas to steal 5 congressional seats, not just from the Democrats who represent those seats, but the people, the millions of people who are represented within those districts. Your county chair traveled 3 hours to Arlington, Texas with traffic and got in front of that commission and absolutely dressed them down for the fraud that they're trying to perpetrate on this state right now. Sin vergüenza, he kept yelling to these guys. And if you're like me, you try to stay off the internet as much as you can. Better for your health that way. But if you tune into the internet, you see this guy everywhere right now because America is looking for people who are actually going to stand and fight. This season, as my friend Joaquin Castro says, this season is for fighters only. And we have fighters here in Abilene, Texas. And that's why I'm proud to be with you today. So thank you for coming out. Sammy, thank you for the job you're doing. Okay, the first time I came to Abilene, it was in 2017. I met some of you then. I was running for the United States Senate. Crazy, crazy idea. We were going to take on Ted Cruz, who was the runner-up in the previous year's presidential primary contest in the Republican Party. But for Donald Trump, that guy probably would have been the nominee. He had 100% name ID in the state of Texas. He had money coming out of his ears. He had every political action committee on the planet donating to his campaign. Who were we to think that we could take on that guy? To have a campaign team, I mean, I called anyone who had run a Democratic campaign in the state of Texas. Not a single one of them would call me back because the idea was just as crazy as a snowball rolling through West Texas. I mean, this thing just is not going to work. And so we made a virtue of a necessity. If no one's going to help us with this, if we can't raise the money, if we're not taking PAC checks, which we didn't, then we're going to go everywhere to every county to show up for everyone. You cannot be too red or too rural for us to write you off. You also cannot be too big and too blue for us to take you for granted. And so those travels brought us here early. I remember that we went door to door, right? I don't even think we could gather a group of people early in 2017. So we just started knocking on doors in Abilene, Texas. And one of the first doors that we knocked on, an elderly woman answered the door. And I introduced myself. Hey, I'm this member of Congress from El Paso, Texas. I'm running for Senate. I'm trying to find out what's going on in Abilene. What do you want to talk about? You want to talk about taxes or infrastructure or health care, or tell me what's going on in your life. And she said, well, I'm glad you showed up, but I want to make sure that we keep this brief because I'm about to get a delivery from Meals on Wheels. And she explained to me that not only is she dependent on this program for the calories that literally sustain her so that she can survive and last another day, another week, another year, I hope another 10 years for that matter. But she told me this that absolutely shook me. She said that Meals on Wheels delivery driver who brings the box of food into her home, I don't know if it was once or twice a week, that is the only human being that she will see over the course of that week. And when he puts his hand on his shoulder and says, ma'am, are you doing okay? Is there anything else I can get you? It is the only human touch that she will feel over the course of that week. I tell you, it shook me. It brought me to tears to realize that she was holding on and would be gone but for the kindness of folks who otherwise would be complete strangers. And I want you right now to recognize the woman who has kept this program going in Taylor County for 50 years, Betty Bradley, wherever she is. I want her to stand up. Betty Bradley, right here. This is what we're fighting for. This is what a fighter looks like. This is how we help one another. Thank you for being here and for the work that you do. We need examples like Betty. We need one another because this is a pretty dark time in the history of our country, in our lifetimes. And I don't care how long you've been on this planet. I don't think it has ever been as dark as it is right now. You think about the last 6 or 7 months of this administration, since Donald Trump has been sworn in, just to lay out some of the top lines so that we're all on the same page. He has defied the federal courts, this co-equal branch of government, rejecting, ignoring their court orders one after another. He has dismantled congressionally mandated and chartered and appropriated agencies like USAID or the Department of Education or Meals on Wheels, another co-equal branch of government. He has colluded with corrupt public officials. You saw the deal that he made with New York City Mayor Eric Adams, a quid pro quo. I'll drop the charges on you for your corruption and bribery if you do my bidding in New York City. He is covering up for the wealthiest, the most elite, and the most powerful in this Jeffrey Epstein investigation in which he may be implicated. I mean, you tell me if you see this differently, but why would you give Ghislaine Maxwell, a convicted child sex trafficker, let that sink in, a lighter sentence? She's been moved from a maximum security prison to Camp Fed just outside of Bryan, Texas, in our own state. Why? Perhaps because she is going to play ball with the president as he tries to hide his complicity with whatever, and right now the Lord only knows, Jeffrey Epstein did to those girls who were trafficked, who were raped, who were abused, who in some cases have taken their own lives, because I hope we can only imagine, because we've never suffered this ourselves, I hope the pain and the trauma that they have undergone. And on top of all that, he seeks to dispense with every constitutional safeguard or protection that up until now, over these 249 years, has kept us a nation of laws and not of kings. But most despairing of all, beyond all of that, are all these wealthy and powerful people and institutions that literally have the resources and the power to fight this guy and to stop him, who instead, right now, are bending the knee. It's the big Ivy League universities. You saw Columbia made a $200 million deal. Harvard is looking at $500 million that they're going to give him. For what? I don't know. The law firms that have now agreed to stop defending his political opponents and to contribute hundreds of millions of dollars of pro bono legal work to his chosen causes. Mark Zuckerberg, I don't know how many millions he's given Trump so far. Jeff Bezos, who essentially shut down the Washington Post that he owns, also contributing untold amounts of money to the president. I don't know if you're watching TV this week, but Tim Cook, he is the CEO of Apple. It makes me want to throw my iPhone away, flush it down the toilet, never get on that thing again. He presented Donald Trump a gold-plated, 24-karat gold-plated iPhone in the Oval Office. I mean, you cannot make this stuff up. I would imagine in some empire, in front of the emperor, you would bend the knee and you would give that bar of gold and you'd say, Emperor, please, will you protect my business? Will you allow me to continue to do my work here? But for you and my subservience to your cause, I mean nothing, is what Tim Cook was saying in that. And even some Democrats, with friends like these, Chuck Schumer, who holds the highest position of public trust for a Democrat in the United States Senate, when there was a funding debate earlier this year, Donald Trump and at the time Elon Musk were asking for an absolute blank check to spend on and dismantle anything that they wanted to in this country. Almost every single member of the Democratic caucus in the United States House of Representatives stood strong and rejected this attempt. And in the Senate, Chuck Schumer promised us he would do the same, but ultimately he too, for we don't know what reason, he bent the knee as well. So at this time, where we see the most powerful man on the planet, literally, Donald Trump, backed by the wealthiest people in the world, Elon Musk and their ilk, we must ask ourselves the same question I was asking myself in 2017. I mean, who are we against all of them and all of this? And just to make it interesting, And just to bring it home to Texas, now they want more power. They're trying to steal these 5 congressional districts that I talked about right here in our state. And you can forgive them for trying. Everyone else, no matter their wealth or their power or their status in this country, has bent the knee and has done their bidding. But I don't think they anticipated the fight that I see here in this room, that I found in Sammy's testimony, that we're here all over the state of Texas. Donald Trump is about to find out that in the state of Texas, our knees don't bend. We are going to stand and we are going to fight. We are not going to give in. We are not going to give up. We are not going to do their bidding. And these 54 state House Democrats who broke quorum, who left the state of Texas at extraordinary personal risk. They're fined $500 a day to a person. They make $7,200 a year in this position of public trust. The governor has filed with the Texas Supreme Court to vacate their offices, to remove them from their ability to represent the people that they have been serving. He's also proposing to file second-degree felony charges against every one of them. He has sent Texas DPS state troopers to, quote, hunt them down. And now our senior Senator John Cornyn just made a deal with Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, to send federal law enforcement after them as well. Those 54 are all that stand between us and those stolen 5 congressional seats, because if we allow this to pass, if they fail at this moment of truth, I believe that after 2026, if we fail to stop this steal, win a majority in the House, the consolidation of authoritarian power in this country will be nearly unstoppable. What that means, more masked, plainclothes federal agents without warrants or badges, picking our fellow Americans up off the streets, and lest you labor under the illusion that it's just illegals or terrorists or thugs or gang members. We have no ideas, because due process and constitutional protections have been suspended. We literally do not know the names of those who have been picked up, detained, imprisoned, deported, in some cases for life sentences in a gulag in El Salvador. And when we send the wrong person away, or that wrong person's identified, the administration says, you know what? It's out of my hands. That person is in a foreign jurisdiction right now. In addition, y además, they are building $45 billion in new ICE detention capacity right here in America. There is a new $230 million facility being built in my hometown of El Paso, Texas. It will be the largest ICE detention facility, bar none, in America. Now, ask yourself this. Illegal immigration is at its lowest point in American history. The sweeps that we're seeing everywhere, churches, federal courthouses, schools, people's homes, the parking lots of Home Depots and Lowe's, everywhere. They're the greatest that we've ever witnessed, those of us who are alive here today. So if immigration is at an all-time low, if we're deporting everyone that we can out of this country, even people who are legally non-deportable, why are we building $45 billion in new detention capacity? I'll tell you what, this president has warned us. First, he's coming for the illegals and the thugs and the terrorists, in his words. Next, he told us he's going to come for the homegrowns. On the first day of his presidency, he issued an executive order removing birthright citizenship to anyone who was born to an immigrant parent, even if they were born right here in Abilene, Texas. Now, birthright citizenship, as you know, is enshrined in the Constitution, in the 14th Amendment that was ratified in 1868. But that history does us no good, because ultimately that case is going to make its way to the United States Supreme Court, that has members on that bench handpicked by Donald Trump for their submissiveness, for their complicity, for their willingness to bend the knee to him as well. Think about who's going to go in those cells. What if it is people like us, who stand up and say this is illegal, this is not right. Here are your rights so that you are not illegally detained or arrested or deported. Maybe we are then aiding and abetting this enemy that Donald Trump has singled out. Maybe those cells and those detention holding centers are for us as well. You know the poem that came out of the Holocaust. You know, first they came for the socialists, but I wasn't a socialist, so I didn't say a word. Then they came for the trade unions. I wasn't a member, so I didn't feel like I had to speak up. Next, they came for the Jews, and because I was not Jewish, I didn't make a sound. And now that they've come for me, there is no one to say a word. That's what they're doing right now, dividing us, distracting us, picking the people that they think we will not stand by until they get to the next group and the next group and the next group. I mean, I'm making the case to you that this is our moment of truth. If we wait too long to begin the fight will be over. In Germany, Hitler is named chancellor in January of 1933. It took him 53 days to destroy German democracy. At every turn during those 53 days, every time he exceeded his authority, every time he defied the German Constitution, every time he broke the German law in plain daylight, the German press, German politicians, the German public, that's us, we did far too little, too late. In 53 days, he goes from being this buffoonish thug who can barely hold power to the undisputed master and dictator of the German people. Now, I know that history doesn't repeat, but very often it rhymes. We've got to be listening, we've got to be paying attention, and we've got to place ourselves in that historical context and say, what would I do if that was happening and I lived there? Because you are living here right now, and it is happening to us today. Here's the plus side. If we fight with all we've got, if we choose not to give in, if we don't bend the knee, if we continue to stand and fight, if we win not just those 5 seats that are trying to steal from us right now, but pick up other seats in Texas and Nebraska and Kansas and Oklahoma, the states, well, they'll never see us coming, just like they don't expect us to be here in Abilene today. If we win that majority in the House, we can provide a check on his lawlessness. We can provide accountability for his crimes and his corruption, and we can work to guarantee free and fair elections in this country going forward. That is our future, if we choose to fight. Now, Ellen stopped me when I came in. I don't know where you are, Ellen, but she said, are you going to tell us what we can do to fight? Are you going to actually give me an example of how I fight this? And so, Ellen, this is for you. I want to make sure, though, that we begin with this premise. Too many of us, and I'll include myself, especially in the first Trump term, we talked about fighting back and about resisting. And we were reacting and we were responding, and we weren't paying attention to that history. I mean, there was a resistance in Germany. There was a resistance in France. There was a resistance in Poland. There was a resistance in the ghettos in Warsaw. But that resistance, as noble as those men and women were, was too little, too late. The action needed to happen before there was a need for resistance. So I ask you to think about not fighting back, but taking the fight to them. If you think about it like a boxer, we're going to get off the back foot, off of the ropes, onto the front one. We're not going to await the punch to be thrown by these would-be fascists. We're going to throw ours first, and we're going to throw it harder, right? We're going to get off of defense, and we're going to get onto offense. And what that looks like, it means that if you can, I want you to support those 54 Democrats who are doing all of the work right now for all of us, not just in Texas, but anywhere our friends and family may live across the country. And I made the case to you that this is not easy. It comes at great risk, and it's very expensive. If you want to send a donation to make sure that we can win this fight, you can text the word FIGHT to 20377. FIGHT to 20377. That's one thing you can do. Second, the folks who are here in the yellow vests, I was just talking to Ed back there, they will sign you up to join an organization that I lead called Powered by People. Now, what will we ask you to do? Well, we certainly won't wait until 2026 to activate you. In fact, we'll get in touch with you this next week. We will sign you up for a training so that you can become a volunteer deputy registrar, a VDR. Some of you know what that is. But for those who don't, there's no online voter registration in Texas. We're one of the last states not to have. There's no automatic voter registration. There's no same-day voter registration. Imagine you're 18 years old, and you've got to figure out how to print out a form from the Texas Secretary of State website, fill out that form correctly, find an envelope, and then put a stamp. What is a stamp if you're 18 years old? Put a stamp on that envelope, send it into the registrar, track that thing down, and make sure that you're registered to vote. If you join us in Powered by People, we will train you in all that. We'll pair you with other volunteers and hosts, and we'll deploy you to the college campuses right here in Taylor County. You have so many of them, to meet these students on the first day of school, the third week of their semester, right before they leave for Thanksgiving break. Meet them where they are. Make sure that we sign them up, get them on the rolls. And then in addition, this is something that we uniquely do. We stay in touch with these newly registered young voters to make sure that they can actually cast a ballot. This is the toughest state in the nation in which to vote, and we make it particularly hard for young people. So we're going to ask you personally, stay in touch with that new voter to make sure they get their voter registration card in the mail, that they know where their early voting location is, when early voting starts, and who the candidates are that align with their values. Bring them into this fight, in other words. So before you leave today, make sure that you sign up with Ed or one of our great volunteers. They will enlist you in that, Ellen, as well. Other thing we can do, we can put some pressure on those Democrats who actually hold power right now. I'm thinking the governors of New Jersey and Maryland and New York and Illinois and California, and there are more. They have the power to seize the initiative and not wait for Texas Republicans to act first. I'm calling on them, and I want you to join me to redistrict their states to maximize Democratic congressional advantage there, instead of waiting for it to be taken away from us right here. And if you're like me, this isn't an easy thing to swallow. I'm a big believer in citizen-led redistricting commissions, getting politicians out of it, no longer allowing members of Congress to choose their voters, because we know it should work the other way around. But I hope you agree that we cannot unilaterally disarm. We cannot stand back. We cannot throw our hands up. It's as though we're in a basketball game, and the refs have left the arena, and the other side is just socking us in the face, using violence against us, and we're throwing our hands up and asking the audience, do you see what's going on here? I mean, the audience sees what's going on, but they want to see if we are going to fight back and fight fire with fire. If we do that, just imagine California, which has the most congressional districts of any state. They could redraw those districts there to maximize Democratic advantage, so Democrats would represent each and every single one of them. Those are the rules of the game today, and we need to make sure that we win by those rules, even if it is personally distasteful to us right now. And then lastly, any opportunity you have, such as the one that you took today to be here, to join a protest, the No Kings, the Hands Off, whatever you see here in Taylor or any of the other surrounding counties, promise me, promise yourself that you will join, because this stuff is breaking through. It's giving other people hope and heart and encouragement right at the time that they need it. How many have felt alone at this moment, have felt hopeless, have felt tempted to despair? Sometimes it takes another human being to show up and meet you where you are and remind you of what's at stake. There's a reason that Donald Trump is polling at 35% on immigration. There's a reason that he's polling even lower on the economy. People are finding out through these protests that their Medicaid is about to be cut, that Social Security is on the chopping block. I talked to John as I was coming in. I talked to Ed that I just mentioned. Both of them are Vietnam-era veterans. And now think about this. Veterans of their generation who fought a war this country never fully understood, who came home not to ticker tape parades or thank you for your service, but came back to this community nonetheless and gave the best years of their lives to building up Abilene, to raising their families, to doing their level best. Veterans like them right now are waiting not weeks or months, but in some cases years to be seen by a provider at our VA for the PTSD or traumatic brain injury that they incurred in service to this country. Donald Trump, you need to remind folks that these protests is cutting 83,000 positions at the VA. It is going to hurt veterans right here who put their lives on the line for this country. This stuff is breaking through right now. Those protests are something that we can do. And one reminder, if you think this stuff doesn't work. 1965, a non-election year, right? Just like 2025, 60 years ago. 24-year-old John Lewis leads a march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge from Selma to Montgomery. And in so doing, nearly loses his life. The police who met him on that bridge cracked his skull with their batons, beat up the other protesters. One person lost their lives in the process. But it so galvanized this country. It catalyzed the conversation on voting rights. LBJ, the first president from this state, he calls a joint session of Congress just 8 days later and gives one of the most remarkable speeches, I think, in American history. With the power that protesters gave him, he's able to compel a majority of the House and the Senate to pass voting rights, which he signed into law on the 6th of August, just a few days ago, 60 years back. That is the power that you have as a citizen in this country that it's worth. Now this, I talked a lot about what we're fighting against, how we have to overcome them, what it is going to take. Let me leave you with one more idea in a few parts. We also have to be able to share with ourselves and our family members and our friends right here in Abilene what we are fighting for, how America will be better if we stop them and if we win power for ourselves. Beginning with democracy. On the 60-year anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, knowing that the Voting Rights Act itself has been completely gutted by the Roberts Court. Instead of telling folks, as we did in 2024, that we're going to save a democracy that really, functionally, effectively does not exist in this country, not when it is so hard to vote in the state of Texas, not when one man, Elon Musk, can spend $300 million to purchase an outcome for his preferred presidential candidate, not when members of Congress can stay in office for the rest of their natural lives, insulated from the very people that they should be accountable to, not when we don't have the access to the people in positions of public trust that we deserve. So I say, instead of saving something that doesn't work, how about we build a democracy that is worth saving? What if we overturn Citizens United so that corporations are no longer people and money is no longer speech? What if we pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Adjustment Act, which would ensure that we have free and fair elections in the state of Texas? What if we got big money and political action committees out of our politics altogether? What if we set term limits so someone in this room can replace Jody Arrington so he's not able to stay there for the rest of his life? And what if, after we win power, we do get the politicians out of the room on redistricting and return that power, all of it, back to the people? But that political democracy that I'm talking about, that we're all working for right now, it is impossible without an economic democracy as well. The gulf between the haves and the have-nots has never, ever been greater in the history of this country. Over the last 50 years, $50 trillion, $50 trillion, has moved from middle and lower income Americans to the very wealthiest people on the planet who call this country their home. It has happened under Republican presidents. It has happened under Democratic ones as well. When people feel estranged and alienated and have no future in this country, they make decisions that follow suit. And I think it explains a lot of our politics today. When folks cannot get what they need from a government of the many, soon enough they're open to getting what they need from a government of the few, or a government even of only one. So let us listen to them when they ask us to deliver for them on what they need, and it's not a lot. They ask us for things like being able to work just one job instead of 2 or 3 to make ends meet. They ask us to be able to afford to teach school in the state of Texas without having the resources drained from our public local schools and themselves not having to work extra jobs for the privilege of teaching our kids. They ask for the ability to be able to buy a home as long as they're working for it, because generations like mine and my parents and my grandparents, they were able to do it. But the generation coming up right now, to a person, I hear from them, they feel like it is hopeless right now. Their American dream has turned into a nightmare. What if we could guarantee, if you work for it, if you do your level best, that home is in your future for yourself, for your kids, the wealth that you can pass on from generation to generation. Many of us are parents. Some of us are grandparents in this room. All of us want the generations that follow ours to do better. I've got an 18, a 17, and a 14-year-old. For the first time in American history, it is rolling in reverse. The generations that follow ours are doing worse than us. We, some of those my age, are doing worse than the generation that followed before. First time in American history. And look, don't let anyone tell you different. It's not as though we lack the resources to accomplish this. We're the wealthiest country in the world. We're the wealthiest country in world history. It is just that we've lacked the political will to get this done. I want you also to imagine a future where all of us are treated with the dignity and respect that we deserve. You see these attacks right now on transgender Americans. They are hoping, just like with the so-called thugs and terrorists and gangbangers that they are labeling immigrants, that you'll be afraid to stand next to them in solidarity. They can separate us and divide us and distract us as they continue the largest heist in American history. So the next time you see a transgender American attacked, stand by her or him. Make sure that they know that we're in this together. No one is expendable. No one is politically inconvenient. All of us count. And then a point of local pride. Remember this when we're talking about human rights. 1973, 52 years ago, abortion was just as illegal in the state of Texas as it is today. But no one rode to the rescue of the women of Texas. No court, no president, no legislature made it better for those who were suffering and dying because they did not have the right or ability or power to make their own decisions about their own body and their own future and their own health care. It was actually 3 Texas women who saved the entire country. Linda Coffey, one of the attorneys, Jane Roe, their client, and from bright blue, Abilene, Texas, Sarah Weddington, 26 years old, baby lawyer. The most complicated case this Abilene native had ever tried was a no-contest divorce. She goes up before an all-male United States Supreme Court in 1972 and 1973 and convinces that court to render one of the most consequential decisions in 20th century American history. It stood the test of time for 49 years. So, memo to Donald Trump, do not mess with the women of Abilene. Do not mess with the women of Texas. We are going to win this back one way or another. Those human rights, they extend everywhere. As the most powerful country on the planet, there are certain responsibilities that come with that. So when we say human rights, we mean it for everyone. So I want you to imagine a future where this country is no longer complicit in the bombing and the starving and the slaughtering of children in Gaza, of innocent families in Gaza, of people who have committed no crime and deserve nothing close to what they're receiving right now. And instead, we use this awesome power that the generations before ours, people like Ed and John, literally put their lives on the line to create in the first place. What if, instead of starting new wars or being complicit in the ones that are being waged today, we decide that we're going to sow peace and reap prosperity? Use this awesome power, for example, to convene the nations of the region or the world, if that's what it takes, to create an independent, sovereign state for the Palestinian people, to protect their safety, the safety of the Israeli people, the safety of all people in that region. It's not just good for them, it's good for us as well. And then bring that same logic back home. And imagine a future where we no longer stand for our fellow Americans being rounded up with these Gestapo tactics that we expect from another place ruled by fascists or tyrants or kings, but not a free people who are governed by law instead of by kings. But that is what's happening here today. And we know it's not just immigrants. We know that U.S. citizen children, including one with stage 4 cancer, was deported without her medication right now. This cruelty is being done in the name of each and every single one of us. As long as we hold any hope of being a government of, by, and for the people. Anything this country does is done in your name and in mine. So I imagine a future where we recommit ourselves to this great Constitution, the thing, more than any other, that sets us apart from so much of the rest of the world. Everything in it, like your constitutional rights and protections, like due process, like being able to defend yourself in front of a judge, having the facts known to those in that courtroom, to the press and the public. That is what has kept us as honest as we've been, as free as we've been. And if we turn our backs on it, it will be to our peril. So we must recommit ourselves to that Constitution. And on the issue of immigration, Democrats over the course of my life have talked an awfully big game. I have not been to a political rally or town hall conducted by a Democrat that does not talk about comprehensive immigration reform. And yet, if we're going to be honest with each other, when Democrats have had power, we have found them lacking. We won the White House, the House, and the Senate in 2008, and the president did wonderful things with that power, but he did not move on immigration. We won the White House, the House, and the Senate in 2020, and President Biden did amazing things with that power, but he did not move forward on immigration. Look, our fellow citizens can be forgiven for having held out hope for so long that Democrats will deliver, and when we've proven to them that we don't, they're willing to take a chance to roll the dice with someone who has a different plan, even if they don't like every particular piece of it. That is how we've ended up where we are right now. So, the next time that we win power, let's not even talk about it, but let's use it for all it's worth. Let's drive the car like we stole it. Let's legalize every dreamer, every dreamer's parents, every hard-working American doing backbreaking work that would not be done otherwise, but for their willingness to do it. Imagine them making this country even greater as U.S. citizens. And look, as my fellow West Texans, or as we refer to in El Paso, East Texans, you get that on immigration, most of us, Republican, Democrat, Independent, alike, we're on the same page. I mean, we want to know who's coming into this country. I mean, that's just a basic common sense thing that we got to get right. We want to protect one another from violent criminals, whether they were born in Abilene or El Paso or Ciudad Juarez or anywhere else around the world. I'm on the same page, okay? That makes sense to me. But do not let them tell you that immigrants are taking anything from us. Immigrants are giving far more back to this country than they could ever draw down over the course of their lifetimes. We are so lucky to be a country of immigrants. And lastly, I want you to imagine a Democratic Party. And this meeting, by the way, is open to Republicans, Independents, and Democrats alike. We want the broadest possible coalition, a united front. We judge no one for who they voted for last time or if they voted at all. Doesn't matter. No me importa. What matters now is that we're together here in this room. We want a Democratic Party that will fight for these things, right? Will not submit, will not roll over, will not bend the knee, but will fight. And not just fight in Austin, in Houston, in San Antonio, and Dallas. Those cities are important, and please fight there as well. But you got to show up in places like Mineral Wells. You got to show up in places like Abilene, Texas. You got to show up. You got to show up everywhere across the state. Fight on every front. I want you to think, as you go home or back to work tomorrow or to school when it starts later this month, and you encounter that person who's like, hey, I hear you that you want to stop this steal in Texas, this power grab that the president has launched. I hear you that you want to accomplish all these great things that we talked about here today. But it's just impossible. I mean, look at the odds. I mean, this thing is over. Our goose is cooked. We're not going to make it. Just give in. Just focus on your television set or your screen in front of you or your friends and family and just ride this thing out. Just remember, by the way, who we are at the end of the day. These 249 years that I keep referencing from 1776 to 2025. Look at what we have been up against over those 2.5 centuries. Look at what we've overcome. To secure our independence and our freedom from ever being ruled by kings, we defeated the most powerful, the mightiest empire on the planet. To ensure that no man could earn his bread from the sweat of another man's face, as Lincoln put it, We defeated the armies of the Confederacy. We lost 300,000 Union dead, 17, 18, 19-year-old boys and men who gave their lives to end slavery and ensure that we came a little closer to realizing that foundational premise of this country, that we are all created equal and shall be treated equally under the law. It wasn't 80 years later that men from Abilene, Texas, landed on those beaches in Normandy, France on the 6th of June, 1944, fighting fascism half a world away to defend this great democracy here at home. And the generation that came up after them, peacefully, nonviolently, democratically protesting and marching and organizing to win the full civil and political rights for every single American in the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65. That's who we are at the end of the day. And they overcame the elected and armed thugs of the Jim Crow South. All of that, against all of those odds. And we won every single time. And now that inheritance has come down to us. We are the beneficiaries of 249 years of service and struggle and sacrifice. And what we do with this will determine us in terms of our future. It will define us in the eyes of history. Our kids, our grandkids, the generations yet unborn are waiting, are watching, are looking at us right now, and we cannot be found wanting at this moment of truth. So I ask you, and I remind you, to not let this moment pass without a fight. 2026 will be decided in 2025. And what we do will determine what happens in 2028 and every major election thereafter. Do what you can with what you have, wherever you are, every single day. Choose to fight, choose to stand, never bend the knee, and let's win this country back for each and every single one of us. Thank you all for coming out here today, for being part of this town hall. Les agradezco. I'm grateful to you. Thank you. Thank you all. Ms. Cano. All right. We want to bring some more voices into the conversation. Cynthia Cano has got a microphone. She just jacked up the air conditioning for anyone who's getting hot. Cynthia's in the white shirt, black hat, just where I'm pointing right now. If you would like to be recognized, to share an idea, to provide a solution to a problem that you've identified, to ask a question, we are all ears, and we're looking forward to hearing what you've got to say.
All right, here's our first question.
Hi, my name is Melissa. I'm with Defend Democracy Abilene. And we are putting on protests and events. Kyle Rabel is running for Congress. He comes and speaks. We're doing these things, and we've got to get attendance. We have to get people to come out and fight. We have to let people know that Abilene, Texas, is going to fight back, that we're not going to be a red state or county. We used to be a Democratic county. We could be that again, but we have to get everyone to vote. That is the most important thing to me. But I do have one question.
Please.
What would you say is going to help end the war in Gaza? Like, what do we do? What can we do? My friend in Gaza's sister was shot yesterday. She's 8 years old. I have a grandchild that age. She was shot in the hip, here, in the abdomen, and in her knee. She needs surgery, but she can't get it because the hospitals are full. She's 8 years old, guys. So what can we do other than donate to the families and do the protest and all the things? Like, what can we do?
Yeah. Thank you for asking this question. Thank you for your words of encouragement for people in Abilene to become part of this fight and to make sure that we don't submit. I'll tell you what, there's probably not a person in this room who is unmoved by what is going on and what has happened. We could go back to ancient history and all the way up through to today. A couple of years ago on October 7th, that horrific attack on Israel that killed so many, that saw so many abducted and kidnapped. Some of them, we hope, are still alive and will be returned to Israel. We want them to be alive. We need to push with all we can, with the might of the United States, to make that happen. The more than 50,000 people in Gaza who have been slaughtered. Israel, with the complicity of the United States, using U.S. bombs and your taxpayer dollars, has flattened schools, has flattened mosques, has just attacked a Catholic church. I mean, it's almost non-discriminatory. It's just anybody in Gaza. And to the gentleman's point, children, it's not that they will starve. They are starving to death. Children have died because we talked about Meals on Wheels earlier. They literally cannot get enough calories into their system to continue to breathe and live. This is happening, and just so that everyone's clear, because we are funding this, we are complicit in this. This is happening in your name and in mine. It is happening with your tax dollars, and it is happening with mine. So the very excellent question, beyond just describing this vision of no longer being complicit in this and working to end it by having a sovereign, independent Palestinian state, what do we do right now? Lincoln, my favorite American, if I have one, he has this great line about power. He says, you got the presidency, pretty powerful, the courts, the legislatures, but more powerful than all that is the people. And he used the word or the phrase public sentiment. He said, public sentiment is everything. With it, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. Now, what do I mean by that? I gave you the example of John Lewis earlier. LBJ had told Dr. King at the end of 1964, when King begged him to move forward on voting rights, Johnson said, I used up all my power on civil rights in 64. That was the whole shot. I'm sorry, I'm done. And when King left the Oval Office, he said to Andrew Young, we got to go out there and get that guy some power. That's what John Lewis was doing the next year in 1965, marching across that bridge. He wasn't doing it for himself. He was doing it to give the president the power to force his hand. In 2018, during the first Trump administration, you all remember that our government, under his leadership, but in our name, was separating families who arrived at the southern border. That young mother with the 2-year-old child in her arms who just braved 2,000 miles to get to refuge because if she had stayed back in Honduras or Guatemala or El Salvador, that little kid would be dead, doing what all of us would do. In the same situation, this country took that baby from her arms, deported the mom back to Central America, and put that kid into the foster care system in this country. We hope not the foster care system in the state of Texas, because it is the worst run foster care system in America right now. We didn't like that. We spoke up. We took to the State House steps. We wrote our members of Congress. We lit up the switchboard at the White House, and we protested. And some of you joined me in El Paso County in a little camp that they had built for these kids who'd been kidnapped for their parents in a town called Tornillo, Texas. More than 1,000 of us came together on Father's Day 2018 to bear witness to what was being done in our name, and also to testify out to our fellow Americans. We together, and this was happening across the country, created so much pressure on the first Trump administration that 3 days after those protests, he did something that he had never done before, and I don't know that I've seen him do since. He rescinded his executive order, and he ended family separation in America. Now, that's an example in more modern times of public sentiment and its power. So if you do not like what we are doing in Gaza today, make sure that your government knows it. I cannot promise you that it is going to break through or change his mind or stop the slaughter and the starving and the bombing and the torture and the brutality. But I can guarantee you, if we do nothing, it is going to continue for sure. So that's one idea. The second is, and this is a hard one, but this is going to be the answer to so many of our questions. How do we do this? How do we do that? The only way out is going to be through. And it's got to include winning political power here in Texas, winning political power at a national level, and then when we have that power, using it for all that it's worth. Holding our own side accountable when our own side fails, as our own side did on this very issue when it held power, and the voters did not forget that. So, thank you.
Here we go. Right over here is our next question.
We'll get the microphone over to you.
We need to give you a mic, sir. Can you hold on?
No, it won't take AIPAC money. Yeah.
All right.
Not for this. Absolutely not. Yeah.
Please wait until you have a mic, everybody. Please wait. Here we go. Here's our next question, right here.
Yeah.
Howdy, y'all. I'm the car rebel she was talking about, the man that's running against Jody Arrington.
All right.
Thank y'all. Some of you have already heard me enough, so I'm not going to do my thing. And Beto, you have heard me do this already too. But my question for you is the same question because I come out to Abilene like 4 times a month now because Abilene is a major city and we have to stop pretending it, as Kendall would say. How do we help our grassroots candidates? I'm out here all the time begging people in Taylor County to run too. I know in Lubbock there's 50-some seats. I'm sure it's the same amount here. What do we do to help them? How do we get them help? How do we change the system and uplift Democrats? I'm sorry, I don't care about independents on the Republican system. I want Democrats to win because we're the ones that can change the world. How do we do that?
Well, you're a great example of that. You know, some would look at the odds in this district and write it off. It's just unwinnable. It's not going to happen, right? But you know better. You know that we together control our own fate and our own future and our own fortune. We make our own luck, in other words. We think about what's going to happen in 2026 as Trump continues to drive the economy into the ditch, as we see more of our fellow Americans swept up in these roundups, not just in the big blue states on the coast, but happening right here in Texas and in rural Texas as well, as we see more of our local schools defunded to send vouchers to rich kids who are already going to private schools in big cities, as there's more of a backlash against what we see in Austin and what we see happening in Washington, D.C., when that wind is at our back, we better have fielded the strongest, fiercest candidates at every position of the ballot. Justice of the Peace, County Commissioner, U.S. Congress, State House, State Senate, all the way up and down. I saw the benefit of it in 2018. The reason that we got so damn close to Ted Cruz in that election, the reason that 12 State House Democratic challengers defeated 12 State House incumbent Republicans. The reason Colin Allred defeated Pete Sessions in his race for Congress, which was an impossible race, more impossible than yours right now, is because they were out there working in 2017, making sure that they were ready when the wind hit our back in 2018. So if I can help you recruit some of these other candidates at other positions on the ballot, I would gladly do that. Because look, if there's not a Democrat making our side of the argument, we cannot blame people for not supporting us. We've got to be there in every county, in every year, in every election, on every place on the ballot. Thank you for what you're doing. I'm with you in this, okay?
Next question right here.
Yes.
Hi, Beto. Thank you for being here with us today. I'm a college student over at ASU, and I'm pretty concerned about the future of the Department of Education, that people who press all the buttons on their computers to process all of our funds, our grants, our federal programs, our research facilities. So I want to know what Texas Democrats are going to do to protect education. I know that a lot of our K through high school schools they run off of property taxes, which is not, it doesn't fund it fully across the state for smaller populations or wherever. So I want to know how Texas Democrats, who won our votes, are going to protect education for us here in Texas.
Thank you. So real important for folks to know, again, if not everyone's up on the same page, that after many attempts, many sessions, thanks to Texas Democrats and some honorable Republicans who stopped Greg Abbott, he was unable to pass this voucher thing that is draining our property tax dollars from our local schools. So he took a $6 million check from an out-of-state billionaire, this guy Jeff Yass in Pennsylvania, who's one of these Christian nationalists. With that $6 million, Greg Abbott purchased the best Republican representatives that money can buy, replacing those Republicans who had stood fast, so that, just so everyone knows the calculus on this, the Democrats still oppose this grab of our property tax dollars out of our local schools, but Abbott had these newly paid for, bought and sold Republicans, and that voucher scam passed. And beginning in this school year, you're going to see fewer dollars in your local schools, more of our educators working more jobs, more schools closing down as they're closing down in El Paso and almost every single community that I've been to. So that's the cost and consequence. Democrats are holding strong, but if Democrats do not win more seats, I don't know that we're going to be able to stop this in Texas. The Department of Education that you mentioned, absolutely being dismantled under the Secretary of Ed, Linda McMahon, under Donald Trump. If we don't win power in 2026, it's going to be pretty hard to restore Title I funding, IDEA funding. This is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So if your kiddo has special needs, intellectual, physical, or otherwise, harder for her to be in a classroom where she's going to get a world-class education. More likely she ends up being warehoused somewhere, or you take care of her yourself in your home because those funds are going away as well. So winning political power, I'm afraid, is the best way to restore this funding, to stop the steal of these resources from our local schools. In the meantime, we can make sure that those who voted for this stuff pay a political price at the ballot box, and that we recruit those challengers who can knock them out of office. Thank you for the question.
Ashley Slaughter, I hear a lot of talk about we need to win back political power and we need to have more Democrats running and we need to be doing these things that we might not feel is right in order to defeat Trump. And while I do want to get Pumpkin Spice Palpatine out of office, Star Wars reference for y'all if you don't know, what safeguards are we going to put in place to make sure that we are getting the right candidates in office? Because we don't just need a blue version of someone else who wants power. We need people who don't just want power but want to do things for the people. So how do we get power and get it in place, but also make sure that we don't end up electing another dictator?
Yeah. It's a great question. I mean, part of the challenge of this moment is that once the precedent is set, that the president can ignore the law, can ignore the courts, can ignore the Congress. What's to prevent a future president, Democrat or Republican, from doing exactly the same thing? So two things. One, when Democrats get back in power, they have to reestablish the guardrails that are missing right now. I mentioned some of those on the democracy side, ending Citizens United so that we don't have this flood of corporate money that is buying the outcomes of elections, constraining the actions of the president. I mean, it's unconstitutional what he's doing with these tariffs right now, but you have a supine Congress that is unwilling to take the fight to him and is essentially abnegating its role to that president right now. Maybe we establish more firmly in U.S. law that the president cannot set those tariffs absent the consent of the United States Congress, and on and on and on and on, right? But you ask, how do we make sure we get the right candidates in the first place? I mean, what we're doing today is just so exceedingly rare in America right now. I asked somebody about the last town hall that Jody Arrington held in this space, where you all were welcome to ask him a question or hold him accountable for what he's done. And someone said, well, I think Ed told me, he's held a telephone town hall. I've been in Congress. I've been on those telephone town halls. You get to screen the questions. You don't have to take, the gentleman's question who just spoke up a second ago, or anyone else's question, or yours for that matter. So I think we say, hey, if you want to run to represent me, be in this position of public trust, that's great. But just because you have a D to your name does not mean that you have my support. I want to hear what you're going to do. I want to ask you these questions about these conditions and these situations, and then see how you respond. And if you're in office, you all should make them promise. I want you to commit that you'll hold a town hall like this, all comers welcome, no holds barred, open to everyone in the community, regardless of party affiliation, every single month, so that we know how you're doing in the State House or in the U.S. Congress. We can hold you accountable for the votes that you've taken, the legislation that you've offered, the progress that you've made or failed to make thus far. I did one of those every month. I went into those town halls with a healthy dose of fear of my constituents, because I remember that they put me in this position in the first place, and they can take it away. And I had better damn well be able to explain what I had been doing with this privilege on their behalf. And so if someone at a town hall asked me a question, very often a veteran, because I was on the Veterans Affairs Committee. Hey, Beto, I want you to make progress on ensuring that other than honorable discharge veterans can get into the VA because they couldn't before. I wasn't going to come back next month and just say, hey, you know what? Republicans are in control. Donald Trump is president. I couldn't get anything done. I had to find a way to move on this stuff because I wasn't going to face them and fail. So I think holding each other accountable like we're doing right now today is a big part of the answer to your question. And then staying on people once they're in a position of power, that John Lewis LBJ example. They didn't just believe LBJ when he said he couldn't do voting rights. They made the guy do it with the power that they had. Thanks for asking this great question.
Behind you.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Doherty. I'm a patient with a rare disease, and so I participate in NIH research. I'm also a cancer researcher, so we rely on cancer research funding from the NIH to pay for progress. I particularly work on cancer vaccines. How do we fight to protect NIH research moving forward? How do we keep progress in our biotechnical industries? The jobs are moving, the companies are pulling up stakes and going elsewhere to countries where their drugs can get past the FDA trials, where they can move with purpose and with efficiency, and we're losing all of that in this country. How can we fight back to protect our health care and our research dollars?
Okay, I want you to keep the mic because I'm going to ask you a question, if that's okay. Interesting thing, I'll give you two quick examples that I hope is going to make the case to answer your question. Anybody ever been to Humble, Texas, outside of Houston? Yeah. A few hands are going up. We held a town hall just like this, and a woman stood up, and I don't believe she'd been at a town hall before, a political event in her life. She said, I'm coming out because I'm 72. My husband is 77. He has Parkinson's, and I'm his primary caregiver right now. And these cuts to Medicaid and the fact that they have zeroed out the Parkinson's research funding at, I think, Johns Hopkins or whatever university was doing this. She says the best case scenario for us, for me and my husband now, is that he dies before I do. Because should I pass before him, the guy is out of luck. Once they cut Medicaid, there's no net that will catch this guy. And I'm praying for that. And tears are streaming down her face. 2 nights ago, we were in New Orleans, Louisiana. And a woman is a researcher researching Alzheimer's, sickle cell anemia, and I forget the third chronic condition that will take your life if we do not figure out how to find the cure. Her funding has gone, her job is over, and we asked her to explain what that meant for us in the audience. So if I could ask the same for you, because sometimes these numbers and statistics, they just go over our head, or they fail to connect with us emotionally. When you hear her answer about what cutting funding for these programs is going to do to the people that you love. I just lost my mom to cancer 2 years ago. Painful process to see her go through that. Expensive, torturous, the insurance, all of that stuff. We were praying and hoping. Anyone who's had a family member, or if you have cancer yourself, I mean, they told us we have a 7% chance. Well, that's not zero. We're going to hold on to 7 with all that we've got. We want to enroll in this trial so that maybe she has another shot to live. We lost her in the end, but we were holding on to hope. So tell us what that means if this funding is cut so that we can all repeat it to our friends and family and make sure that they vote on that basis going forward.
Sure, and I think early February, right, the indirects for NIH funding was cut retroactively to grants that were already passed and to future to 15% indirects, which may sound reasonable to everybody who's a lay person, right? 15% overhead seems like, okay, that'll keep the lights on. But what you don't understand is what can be paid for directly from grant money. You cannot make permanent instrument upgrades, so you can't buy a $600,000 laser microscope to do the research because that exceeds the term of the grant funding, right? So you get a 3-year grant, that's a permanent instrument that has a 10-year life cycle. You cannot pay for those things out of directs. So what happens is that money gets paid for out of indirects. You can't fund a student. You can't have a graduate student who has a 4 or 5-year graduate cycle. You cannot have a PhD student that's going to be performing the research because that exceeds the term of the 3-year grant cycle. So what it does is it decimates the academic institutions It decimates all of the education side of that simply by cutting indirects. And it's not to say that there shouldn't be reasonable indirect. A 30 or 40% indirect rate is a reasonable one. Some schools have an 80% indirect rate. They have a 1-to-2 ratio of grant writers to principal investigators, the people who are actually applying for that. So having a 40% would actually increase competition for places like Texas Tech, where I am, or for UT, or for other smaller schools to get into those research grant access, but also still be providing for it. But a 15% is not reasonable, and that has gone across the board. My husband has a Department of Energy grant. They have also assumed that 15% indirect rate. This is going to decimate academia as we know it and all of those institutions who are performing research. And as a patient, I want more money on the research side. I want to see more research trials funded, but not at the expense of the places who are actually doing the research.
That research ends up, we hope, in the cures for the cancers and the diseases that are killing our loved ones right now. And it just is crazy to me that the wealthiest, most powerful, most medically advanced country on the planet would shoot itself in the foot in this way and decimate, and in some cases outright destroy these research programs around the country. It's not as though it's owning the libs, or Democrats are taking a hit, or the pointy-headed academics are going to lose their jobs. It's people are going to die who otherwise would have lived. So healthcare doesn't discriminate. Thank you for what you're doing and for staying in the fight and explaining this to us. Appreciate it.
Okay, other side of the room, opposite side. Have time for 3 more questions.
Hi, good afternoon. And first of all, thank you for coming out here to Abilene, Texas this afternoon. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, yeah.
My question has to do with labor rates, minimum wage. Currently, minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, national minimum wage. For food service workers, it's even lower. It's in the low $2 range. My question is, one of the issues with minimum wage is that it doesn't have an automatic increase factor into it. It's basically up to the Department of Labor to come out with a new rate. Could you speak to that a little bit? And also, how do you feel about tying automatic increases, say, every 3 years, 5 years, to some sort of inflation index like the CPI, Consumer Price Index, something like that? Because it's been 2009 since the last one was raised for the regular rate, and I believe 1991 or 92 since the food service rate was actually increased. So could you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. $7.25, as you just mentioned, it's the federal minimum wage. It's also the Texas minimum wage. And I meet people in my travels who are making $7.25 an hour. In addition, there are people who are making more, but their wages are pegged to the minimum wage. So in other words, if the minimum wage goes up, those earning the minimum wage get paid more. Those earning above the minimum wage will get paid more. Literally everyone does better. Now, there's a philosophical question for all of us to consider. If you believe there should be a minimum wage, you're on one side of it. If you don't think there should be a minimum wage, you're on the other side. And listen, I think reasonable people, maybe kind of on the extreme side, can disagree on this one. The absolute libertarians who just believe that the free hand of the market should decide what you're paid. If they want to pay you $1, if they want to pay you $100, that's up to them. Okay, that's that side of the argument. I'm going to wager that most of us are on the other side that believe there should be some floor beneath which you cannot pay somebody. So if you believe that, if we're all on the same page there, then to the gentleman's point, minimum wage, which has not changed since 2009, and I'm going to guess that the cost of your automobiles, your appliances, your cars, your food, anything else has gone up extraordinarily high since then. That should be pegged to the Consumer Price Index or to some other thing that matches our reality. When I mentioned the $50 trillion that has been moved from working Americans, middle class, lower income Americans to the wealthiest, one of the ways in which that has been done is a failure to move the minimum wage up. If we kept the minimum wage relative to what it was in 1973 or 1975, the minimum wage, you might know the number today. I mean, it would be well north of $30 an hour. What is it? To 50? 1.5. Okay. It might even be higher than that. I've seen numbers that are higher than that. In other words, you should be able to work that job and afford to pay for your education, make the note on your mortgage, put food on the table, whatever you need to do, which people just cannot do right now. No wonder so much of America is so pissed off and willing to roll the dice on a guy who says he's going to blow the whole thing up, drain the swamp, destroy this system that has failed you so badly. If our party cannot be as radical towards the right way to look at this, as raising the wage, making sure you can afford to see a doctor, buy a home, and all that stuff, then I can't blame anybody for voting the other side, even though they are selling snake oil and people's lives are getting worse under this administration. So yes, raise the minimum wage. Peg future raises on a yearly basis to the consumer price index or some other measure of inflation in this country. But then you've got to go well beyond that to those other economic democracy measures that we talked about, including, especially in this state, making it safe and legal to be able to join a union so you can band together with others to improve your working conditions, your wages, your safety, the service that you deliver to the public. So thank you for bringing that up.
To your left.
Hi, my name is Kaya, and I am an atheist, and most of my friends are non-religious. Oh, shout out. Most of my friends are non-religious, and we have a growing concern with the rise of Christian nationalism, Christofascism, whatever you want to call it, and living in what is quickly becoming an evangelical theocracy. How would you respond to that? How can the Democratic Party reach out to non-Christian, non-evangelical people, not only to protect their rights, but make them feel welcome in this space?
Great. Thanks for asking this question. I kept mentioning the 249 years of this country, and you go back to our foundation, this Declaration of Independence, we're all created equal, and the other things that flow from that. I think about how much more conservative and fundamentally religious people were in the 18th century when this whole notion was conceived. And yet even then, there was freedom to choose your religion. There was freedom from religion, to your point. Can you imagine the framers, Thomas Jefferson or any other, mandating that the 10 Commandments would be posted in every classroom, as is the law of the land in the state of Texas right now? How insecure are you that you have to force this on kids there? I mean, I was, lifelong Catholic. My mom took me to Sunday school, catechism, all that stuff. It's a big part of my upbringing and who I am and my history and my relationship with God. That's my business, right? I don't want to force that on anybody else. Your business is your business. You choose that. And the people of Texas who pride themselves on their independence from big government, from, folks who try to impose their visions or views on others, I can't believe that we have submitted to this so far. And I know the present company hasn't. I know you would not vote for this if you were in the state legislature, but the state legislature voted for this right now. And it is not unconnected to the draining of your property tax dollars from your local school to send it to primarily Christian education institutions. 254 counties in Texas, 150 of them do not have a private school to which you could send your child. The overwhelming majority of the money in the voucher program will go to families who are already sending their kids to parochial schools right now. It is like a windfall. This is more of those trillions of dollars moving from working Texans to the wealthiest in this state who are going to private school right now. So we have to call it out for what it is. We have to expose it. To the question asked earlier, we have to hold those who run for office in our name accountable ahead of time before we elect them. Then once in office, accountable for the decisions they make. We've got to fight back against this and get back to our roots of being created equal and being treated as such. Thank you for asking.
To your right, all the way to your right. This is going to be our last question right here.
Hi, I'm Diana. This is
Justina.
And this is
Nicole.
And we are the Liberal Mamas of Abilene. We're very rarely all in the same room together, so we also want to let you guys know that we're here, and we're glad that you guys all are too. And I wanted to let you guys know, because you said if you have any organizing opportunities or ideas, we are organizing, all right? So we've been sneakily building a coalition of some of those angry Abilenian women that you've been talking about. So if you're one of them, just make some noise. Yeah. And we've got a coalition of about 1,000 people, and we've been swinging some elections recently, right? Here at the city council, yeah. And I know a lot of you are ready to get involved. Every Saturday, the Taylor County Democratic Party is having Donuts for Democrats at the People's Plaza. If you want to know what's going on, how to help, how to get involved, when's the next protest, are we making signs, what's going on? I had a young person tell me last Saturday, I should start bringing a notebook to this thing because there's so much going on. So Saturdays at the People's Plaza at the top of the L, we have donuts and coffee, and just come out. We'll get you plugged in. We also have a big fundraiser coming up, the Taylor County Democratic Picnic. We're calling August 24th, not December, August 24th. We're calling it the West Texas Family Reunion because a lot of us, sometimes you can't be an out proud Democrat with your family. It's gotten contentious, but we are your family, and we want to make sure that you know that you're represented and you're not alone. We want you to show up to the polls because it is going to make a difference. And we've got a lot of candidates about to announce because we want representation in Texas, and we got to let them know we got their backs. We're going to knock on every door. We're going to get every vote in this county, all right? So if you guys want to get organized and you want to get plugged in, you got to show up. Start showing up, all right?
All right. Thank you for what you're doing. Abilene, thank you for coming out here today. It's an honor to be with you again. We're going to hang out for a little bit to say hello to anybody who wants to, and then we're going to be heading back to El Paso. Thank you for having us. Gracias.
We have a line over there with if y'all want to stay and say a quick hello, take a photo, we're going to have a line right over there.
Hey, guys. Is it on? Hey, guys. Hey, guys, if you're interested.